When Monique speaks, she doesn't whisper, she testifies. And recently, the Oscar winning actress and comedian shared her concerns about the growing popularity of GLP-1 weight loss drugs, questioning whether we are giving up more than pounds on the scale. What will it do to us 5 years from now, 10 years from now? She asked. They're taking away our willpower. They're taking away our fight. And just like that, a cultural conversation was sparked.
They are pushing so much to us in reference to if you take this shot, you could lose 30 pounds. If you take this pill, you could lose this. But what is the long-term effects? What will it do to your body, your mind? What will it do to us 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And yes, you may look like $1 million on the outside. And you may get down to that size 2 or that size 4 or that size 8 or whatever that thing is. But I would ask you to research what you're putting in your body. Research what you're putting in your body. They got us caught up in trends. And well, if this big star did it and this big celebrity did it, well, I'm definitely going to do it. This is what I will say, and this is just my humble opinion. They're taking away our willpower. They're taking away our fight. They're taking away our ability to say, I believe in myself. I'm going to trust the process. Because if you can just put the shit in a microwave, if you can put it in a microwave, and what happens when you put it in a microwave? It loses all nutritional value. So, I love us for real, y'all. I love my people for real. I don't love y'all just because the words sound good. And I know some of y'all have not always agreed with me. And even the ones that don't agree with me, I love us. And I'm asking y'all to love yourself enough not to be tricked. Not to be tricked. Ooh, that thing had me today. Ooh, because we're so easily tricked, especially us. They could sell us shit on toilet paper, and if the right person's selling it, we'll say that's some good shit on that toilet paper. So please don't get caught up in the names, the fame, the money, the quote-unquote power. And I'm not judging nobody's decision because it is yours. However, I'm talking to the babies out there that is questioning things. Love you enough to trust your process.
GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro were originally created to treat type 2 diabetes. They work by mimicking a hormone that regulates blood sugar and appetite, helping people feel full faster and longer. In recent years, they've become one of the most talked about tools for weight loss. Celebrities, influencers, and everyday people alike have shared their journeys. Some say the medication changed their lives. Others report side effects, from nausea and digestive issues to muscle loss and loose skin. And with ongoing lawsuits surrounding severe gastroid complications, questions about long term use are still being asked.
Lawsuits are growing over weight loss drugs. More than 4,000 individual plaintiffs are now part of a consolidated case. They allege GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy cause complications, including stomach paralysis. The drug makers say the medicine is safe, and they point to benefits around obesity, diabetes, and heart disease.
I want to say something about the weight loss drugs and just drugs in general and our whole medical system. We have to realize that our healthcare system is decaying. And not only that, when it comes to the drug system, as far as the pills and medications that are being made to, air quotes, help us, we have to see by now that these drugs are for profit. It's profit first. It's profit over people. Yes, it may cause you to lose weight, but at what cost? What are the side effects? And some of these drugs, before they're ever tested, or put out, they're tested on animals a lot of times in very limited studies before they're released. A lot of times we're the ones being further tested on. And because when they're first testing it, they have a smaller population that they're giving the drugs to. A lot of times when you may see drug studies come out, and people look for these studies to come out because they want to be the first ones to take them, and they do go over risks and different things with you. But you have to really think about these things, because it is profit over people, and they care about the money. It used to be a time where they wouldn't put out a drug if it had so many side effects where it was going to hurt you worse. But one day they said, you know what? If you lose 2 pounds, we could say you lost weight, even if it was at the cost of you losing a kidney or losing another organ, or blood coming out the anus. It's just like, it's crazy to put your other parts of your body at risk for whatever it is, because this is not the only drugs that are promoted and peddled to us. A lot of people are seeking these drugs for weight loss, for their health, because with weight comes health issues. And so, yes, people want to lose weight. They always have. They've tried diets, they've tried different things, and those were failures for them. So when you come out, with a drug that, even if it's for diabetes, but it has that side effect where you lose weight, that's why so many people are getting on it. But I ended up running across this other news segment that went into more detail about the effects, and I want to insert that video in here now.
Since 2023, roughly 4,200 patients have filed lawsuits challenging the safety of GLP-1s. Joining me to discuss some of those cases and the response from drug manufacturers is USA Today investigative data reporter Austin Bast. It's good to have you back on The Excerpt, Austin.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
As you reported, the most common medical complaint by far is something known as stomach paralysis. What is that exactly, Austin? How does it affect the body?
It's what it sounds like, really. I mean, it's when your stomach stops moving. The muscles are weakened, and so it stops moving your food into the intestines so it can be digested. And so what that happens is it causes people to feel full very quickly, even with just a couple bites of food sometimes. And then it can lead to nausea, vomiting, bloating, pain, and other sorts of problems. And there's not a cure that's known, but it can often be managed through dietary changes and lifestyle changes.
Another major complaint is intestinal obstructions. How severe are some of the worst cases? What have patients alleged here?
Yeah, so aside from the stomach paralysis, I mean, there's some really just gruesome symptoms that the plaintiffs in all these lawsuits are describing. Many of them result in visits to the emergency room or multiple day hospitalizations, and sometimes several hospitalizations at different times through the period that they're taking the drugs. Some people say the symptoms continue even after they stop taking whatever the drug is. So, it has a lasting effect even beyond when they're on it. One example that really caught my attention as I started to look through these lawsuits was a gentleman in Kentucky who had to go to the hospital, he said, a dozen times with cases of fecal vomiting, which is when your intestines are so blocked that literally it goes the only way that it can go, which is up and out. So just really gruesome, terrible stuff.
And you wrote about a smaller number of lawsuits linked to even more serious conditions. Tell me about some of those.
Yeah, there's dozens of state cases in New Jersey, as well as a few dozen federal cases that claim that plaintiffs had what's known as an eye stroke, which causes sudden blindness. It's typically caused when blood flow is blocked to the optic nerve. There were several cases where patients or plaintiffs alleged that these drugs caused gallbladder issues. They had to have their gallbladder removed because it turned they had gangrene there or other issues with their gallbladder. We spoke with a plaintiff in one of the earliest cases that was filed way back in 2023. And she developed a severe neurological condition from malnutrition. Basically, she had a deficiency of a particular vitamin, and it caused this neurological condition, which creates mental confusion. She has an unsteady gait. She can't walk like she used to, and vision changes. And she's really, not the same as she was before she started taking these drugs.
As you said, some of these patients shared their stories with USA Today. Before we get into more of those, how have Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, the drug makers who manufacture these drugs, responded on the issue of the safety of GLP-1s?
Well, generally, they've denied all the claims. They're saying that they stand behind their drug safety and that they'll vigorously defend the reputation of their drugs. They add that they're willing to make updates to the warning labels, when the science proves it, and they have made several changes over the past couple of years. But in general, they're denying most of the claims and the thousands of these lawsuits.
I want to turn now to some of the plaintiffs, starting with 63-year-old Todd Engel of Maryland. Why was he taking Ozempic, and what severe injury did he allege happened due to his use of a GLP-1 drug?
Mr. Engel has diabetes, and so he was taking Ozempic really according to the original use of GLP-1 drugs, which is to help control blood sugar levels in diabetics. His doctor prescribed him a weekly injection of Ozempic back in August of 2023, and just a few months later, in December of that year, he woke up and he had severely blurred vision in one eye. At the time, his doctor really didn't connect it with his Ozempic use. And so he kept taking Ozempic even after he was legally blind in one eye. And 10 months later, in October of 2024, he woke up and turned to his wife next to him in bed and said, "You're not going to believe this. I can't see out of my other eye." So now he's legally blind. And in his lawsuit, they're alleging that it's because of the use of Ozempic. Before he took Ozempic, he was a snowplow driver and moved equipment around the county in Maryland where he lives, but now he can no longer work because of his legal blindness.
And how has the manufacturer, Novo Nordisk, responded to the case?
So we did ask them specifically about Mr. Engel's case, and they did not comment directly on that lawsuit when we asked. But in court documents that they filed in some of these cases, the drug companies, so both Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, which is the other manufacturer, they note that diabetic patients like Mr. Engel are already at a higher risk of conditions like blindness and stomach paralysis and intestinal problems when they're taking the drugs. And last summer, actually, Novo Nordisk's products, Ozempic and Wegovy, they both added notes to the European labels, so not the American labels, but the labels that are used on the drug in Europe, that say that it could increase the risk of eye stroke, like this particular plaintiff alleges that he suffered.
Jo Helen McClain, a 72-year-old real estate agent from Oklahoma City, began taking Wegovy in 2023. What did she share with USA Today?
Right. So Ms. McClain said she, like so many other people who are taking these drugs today, they just want to lose a few pounds. She wanted to slim down, and it worked at first. So she was taking Wegovy. In over about 4 months, she lost 40 pounds with almost no stomach issues, which a doctor that I spoke with told me is actually pretty rare. That doctor said almost everyone who takes a GLP-1 has some sort of gastrointestinal side effect, like nausea or, upset stomach, maybe some vomiting. So it was unusual that she really had no problems at all. And one day, 4 months into taking that drug, she was driving her granddaughter home from softball practice, and they just heard this loud noise, like a balloon popping is what she described. And it was not a balloon. It was her colon rupturing. Luckily, they were just a couple blocks from a hospital. They went straight to the emergency room where the doctors discovered that her intestines had been blocked. And she was just stunned that there'd been no red flags. There was no constipation, pain, upset stomach. It just ruptured without warning, really. And so the doctors there, they had to remove part of her colon, and they created what's called a stoma, which is a valve in her torso where she has to now attach a bag that collects the stool since her colon has been removed. And so since then, She's suffered leaks from the stoma, which understandably has caused her anxiety and depression, since that's as she adjusts to this new reality that she's living. And so because of that, she sued, claiming the manufacturer downplayed the risks of the drugs.
And I know that you asked Novo Nordisk for a comment on her case. How did they respond?
Well, again, like Mr. Engel's case in Maryland, Novo Nordisk did not address her individual case, but they've generally refuted these types of allegations. The FDA label for Wegovy currently warns that it may cause serious side effects, including conditions like thyroid tumors, pancreatitis, gallbladder problems, depression, and, as in this case, severe stomach problems. So that's kind of the closest thing to warning about something like as serious as a ruptured colon.
Austin, how widespread is the use of GLP-1s, and how many plaintiffs have allegedly suffered severe outcomes from using these drugs?
The use of these has really skyrocketed in the past year, a couple years really, and I'm sure that most of your listeners have someone in their circle or their family or friends or colleagues who is currently using a GLP-1. The latest polling that we could find, which comes from a nonpartisan health organization called KFF, they estimated that 12% of American adults right now are using a GLP-1 drug. And so if we do the math, that's over 31 million American adults who are taking these drugs right now. And that same poll said that about 1 in 5 American adults have tried a GLP-1 drug at any point. So that's million Americans. In terms of the lawsuits over severe side effects of these drugs, I looked at federal court records and then state court records in New Jersey, Indiana, and Delaware, because those are the states where these cases are being consolidated, and found over 4,300 individual lawsuits where the plaintiffs are alleging severe side effects from taking these drugs.
You and your colleagues reviewed a random sample of 100 of the thousands of federal lawsuits filed. What else can you share with us about these plaintiffs?
So the majority from that sample, the majority are women, about 2/3 of the plaintiffs in the sample of 100 cases that we looked at. They skew a little bit older than the average American population. The median age is about 52, but there is a broad range. We saw from mid-20s to mid-70s. There was a big chunk of the plaintiffs who didn't just use one of these drugs. They tried one and then maybe switched to another, or were using a couple at the same time. But the majority of them were using Ozempic. That's about 3/4 of the cases in our sample. About a quarter of them were using Trulicity. And then there was a smaller portion, about 17%, that used Mounjaro. And then there's a bunch of other drugs that were mentioned in just a handful of the cases. And so most of the lawsuits are filed against Novo Nordisk, which is a Danish company that makes Ozempic, Wegovy, and several other GLP-1 drugs.
Austin, there's no denying what's alleged in some of these cases is alarming. There are stories that you've told that I'll never forget. But what did experts you spoke with point to you as the positive outcomes linked to GLP-1 use? I know many go beyond weight loss.
Right. And we reviewed quite a few studies and spoke with researchers and doctors. And one doctor from the Veterans Affairs Hospital in St. Louis, he told me that his research shows that these drugs are connected with quite a few health benefits. He described how they can reduce the risk of substance use disorder, alcohol use or drugs. He said it reduces suicidal ideation. It can reduce the risk of seizures, dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and there was a whole list. And that's all in addition to, what we all know now about how it can help people lose weight and control their blood sugar. And so that doctor in particular, he really sympathized with these thousands of patients, particularly ones who have had just terrible changes to their life, such as going blind or all these other changes that we've described. But overall, he still thinks the benefits outweigh the risks for most patients. And he warns his patients to really listen to their body and talk with their doctor if they have any concerns as they're taking these drugs.
What hurdles are the plaintiffs facing here? And when will we get a sense of how these GLP-1 cases might go?
So one of the hurdles in the federal cases is where a plaintiff has said that they suffered from stomach paralysis, the judge in the court where all these cases have been consolidated, that judge is requiring the plaintiffs to have had a particular type of medical test done at the time of their diagnosis to confirm that, yes, in fact, they did have stomach paralysis. So anyone who didn't get that test, back when they were first dealing with these issues, they could actually be winnowed out of these cases and not be able to participate in whatever compensation or outcome the other plaintiffs get. The other thing is that these cases typically take a pretty long time. They're kind of slow moving. Typically since they've all been pooled into this one court in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, they'll have a few what they call bellwether trials. So basically some test trials to see how the cases go. And the plaintiff's attorney told us that that's probably not going to happen until next year. So 2027. And if you think about the first of these lawsuits were filed back in 2023, it's a pretty long process of people waiting, for some sort of compensation for what they say are serious side effects from taking these drugs. But some of the people that we spoke with and their families, they're really hoping that these lawsuits will send a message to the drug companies that will encourage them to really add even stronger and more specific warnings on their drug labels, things such as eye stroke or neurological problems. And they say they never would have taken these drugs if they'd known that these types of things would happen.
But Monique's concern wasn't just medical, it was cultural. She warned that we're being influenced by trends, by celebrity transformations, by a constant pressure to shrink. And when she said, especially us, she was speaking to the history Black communities carry, a history of medical mistrust and beauty standards that have never fully centered our well being. So the question becomes, is using a medical tool a lack of willpower, or is it simply modern medicine? You answer that down in the comment section. Here's where Phatabulous stands. Weight loss is not just physical, it's mental. Many people lose weight with medication, but if your habits don't change, if your movement doesn't increase, if your self-worth is still tied to a dress size, then what really shifted? The most successful, long lasting transformations with or without medication happen when people change their daily lives. They eat differently every day. They move intentionally. They address emotional eating. They prioritize feeling better, not just looking better. If a medication helps quiet the noise so someone can build those habits, that's one conversation. But if it replaces the inner work, that's another. At Phatabulous, we support body autonomy. We support informed decisions. We support plus size people choosing what is the best for their health. But we will never support shame, not for being big and not for seeking help. Your power was never in your pant size. It was always in your mind. And that is something no trend can take away.